thus dedicated himself internally by a voluntary action of his own. He started out on a quest which no one could assist him. No one could do it for him. No one could walk with him. No one could prevent him from making mistakes. It was a lonely journey, a journey from illusion to light, from darkness to participation in eternal truth. This actually did affect the rise of the Christian faith in the early medieval period. The Grail cycle, regardless of its origin, which may have been among the mystery schools of Egypt, Asia, North Africa, Greece, all of these countries, but wherever it began, it became a key to the religion that had no physical structure, a religion that was entirely subjective, a religion to which each individual made his own commitment, and having made this commitment, either succeeded or failed, in either case alone. Therefore, perhaps the entire quest of the Grail is best summarized in the words of Plotinus, who observed on occasion that the way to truth was the journey of a lonely person to that which is eternally alone. It was this aloneness that seems to have been the power of the Grail. Each individual had to call entirely upon his own internal resources. He had to train himself, he had to dedicate himself, he had to consecrate himself. He had to master one by one the weaknesses of his own flesh. He had to overcome the pressures and temptations of ambition and avarice. He had to purify his own nature by a vow taken only to the very highest part of himself. He must slowly climb that mountain between his own material nature and the attainment of the enlightenment of his inner soul. It's a very interesting concept, and probably has never been fully explored, except that there are records and indications that certain persons apparently achieved this tremendous dedication. Also, it was twisted into the cycle of alchemy at one time, so that the purification of the metals, the transformation of all that is base into all that is sacred, was the great alchemical transmutation, performed alone by an alchemist in his little laboratory, by prayer and meditation, and on rare occasion by some type of miraculous manifestation. To the Grail cycle, the miraculous was an internal mystery. It did not deal with the commonplace of life. Miracles did not interfere with the workings of universal law. Miracles were inner experiences of attainment, a proof that the reality was nearer than it had been before. The problem of the origin of the Grail, again, has a great many legends associated with it. One legend says that it was carved from the crest jewel of the archangel Lucifer when he fell from heaven. Others say that it was part of the basin of consecration found in the ancient rites of the tabernacle in the wilderness. Some believe that it was the ecstatic cup of Bacchus or Dionysus in Greece. In most cases, it was a chalice in which the individual had to find ways and attain to the possibility of cleansing the inside of his own cup, which was the actual meaning of the term. Now, in doing this thought, or living this way, we find that there arose in North Africa and in early Christendom a teaching that was to become very important in the life of people. And this teaching was the cultivation of the power of internal visualization. In other words, the individual gradually transformed these ideals into inner pictures. These pictures, like the Oriental mandalas, were visualizations of a superior state of being, visualizations which impel the individual to fulfill them or to achieve the mysteries which they represented. And in some of the old English black books, and on the continent also, the city of the Grail, or the Church of the Grail, is placed at the top part of the great Ptolemaic system of the solar system. You climb the ladder of the 7 planets to reach the entrance of the secret house. This house was above the firmament, and there dwelt together the deity, the triangular Trinity, and the abode of the blessed. So the whole concept gradually became a series of self-disciplines by means of which the individual sought to remove from his nature all forms of defilement. Therefore, in the search for the Grail, there must first be rites of purification. The individual must gradually, to the best of his ability, put his life in order. He will not be able to do so perfectly, that is understood, but he must make a gradual effort to get over the problems by which he is bound to an inferior state by his own center of consciousness. He must get over all grievances. There must be only true and simple acceptance and practice of the noblest form of life which he can experience. Now, if by this type of problem, or this type of living, he gradually overcomes the major weaknesses of his own nature, he gradually comes into a state of internal tranquility. And tranquility is the open door to the sanctuary of the Grail. Tranquility means peace with reality. It means that the individual accepts without question the true teachings of his religion, whatever it may be, and lives it without restriction or compromise. He must have, therefore, the ability to quiet all of the confusions which beset the average person. Now, confusions are very often things that cannot be overcome easily. Sometimes a life is harassed to the degree that it would not appear that the individual could make a new start in his own inner life. But he can if he will. There is never a time in the life of any living thing that has a consciousness in which that consciousness cannot be released constructively. It is a matter of willingness to be dedicated. Assuming that the person achieves this type of dedication, it might be regarded as an order of knighthood. He becomes the first grade of the search for the Grail. And all the knights dedicated their sword handles, which were the form of the cross, to the good fight, the battle to overcome the darkness in self, and to protect the light in others. The Knights of the Garter and so forth were always out protecting people in distress and saving the maiden who was in the hands of the villain. The maiden was the soul, which is always in the hands of the villain until the individual redeems himself. So the knighthood of the Grail began by this proof of courage, proof of integrity. The young knight did not know what he was going to find. He had no promise that he would find it. He was simply told that his hope was to only through the conquest of himself, that no one else could help him, and all the prayers in the world could not bring him the peace that he had to earn by the development of his own character. And he might pray for character, but if he did not have the courage to live it, it would not come to him. So having gone through all these problems, and coming finally to the Gnostic quietude, the individual lacks none of the needs of life, but has an inner tranquility in which he lives in this world, but not of it. He performs all the duties that are his proper responsibilities in life. All effort to escape responsibility is treason as far as the way of the grail is concerned. Having come to this point, then, he settles down to the next step of his growth, namely what the Oriental has always known, the meditative arts. When we relax, we have all kinds of negative thoughts. We worry, we're frightened, we're concerned, we're disappointed, we're disillusioned. We think of the people who have mistreated us and how the world is failing us in our needs. So to the person who is not self-disciplined, relaxation and quietude just end in misery, which is what is intended. Because there is no way in which we can accomplish the purpose until we are able to see within ourselves that we have conquered these mistaken points of view. So by degrees the individual gains the ability to relax and be quiet. Now this has a sort of an initiation with it, because when you get to this point, you've got to relax and be quiet. The individual must learn the importance of being able to get along with himself, and that his great enemy has always been himself. And until he conquers that, he can go no further. The descent into limbo represents the individual cleaning out his own subconscious with which he has to live. It is either a paradiso or a purgatorio according to how he has trained it. If he is selfish, his internal subconscious isn't worth living with. In fact, it would be very hard to live with it. And yet we go along day by day, failing to realize that we are building a toxic subconscious, that we are building an internal life, and the only way we can escape from it is keep our objective consciousness so busy that we have no time to think about the facts of life. We can only be comfortable, so to say, if we can get our minds off of ourselves. And usually we find some useless way of doing it. For instance, when we can't stand ourselves any longer, we turn on the television, and as a result of that, our punishment is magnified. Going to seek for the mysterious crusade for the grail. We're going to search for the cup of eternity. So this brings the individual to the next general feeling. From the purification of himself comes also then the strengthening of his inner realization of deity. After this we come to the truly meditational problem. Having cleansed the heart and mind from all traces of ulterior attitudes, the individual can for the first time come into the state of prayer. Prayer up to that time is just a conversation, usually with the lower part of yourself. But when that part is no longer there, prayer becomes a contact with the highest inspirational levels of consciousness. And because these inspirational levels have the power to perfect or rationalize or make whole all the disasters of the flesh, prayers are answered by the constant increasing of the divine consciousness within the person. Little by little, the divine takes over. And where the divine takes over, there is no longer any need for prayer, because the individual lives constantly in the light of God. So So gradually the Church of the Holy Grail concept is the person gradually becoming part of an assemblage of the enlightened. This assemblage of the enlightened we find in the mythology of Egypt and of Greece and of most ancient peoples. Like the mysterious mountain in the tablet of Cebes, the person rises finally to a mysterious and wonderful castle on the top of the mountain. This is the castle of the inner life, the consciousness. This is the castle that is referred to in alchemy as the shut palace of the king. It is the divine acacia, the place of wisdom, love, and veneration. So little by little we climb up and do what in the Buddhist philosophy means that we ascend to the level or degree of bodhisattvahood. So little by little the conquest of self brings with it the only true happiness that exists in this world. And this happiness does not exist completely in this world, because it comes to those who, while they live in this world, have attained an understanding and insight of something higher and more wonderful. Now, the story of the cup, of course, has a series of meanings. The cup is the grail, or the holy cup, or the sangre real, which is the container of the blood of Christ. It also has been represented in various forms. If it was a pewter cup or clay cup which Christ drank from, it was probably long forgotten and broken. But the symbol of it is eternal. Here is the cup which contains the ever-flowing blood of consciousness. It is the quest for the everlastingness which is behind all things as an attribute of deity. The mystic, therefore, very often says that he does not die, that when the time comes for him to depart from this life, some mysterious miracle occurs and he doesn't die. The physical interpretation of this has very little substance in reality. The only one who didn't and cannot die is the one who finally was the eternal itself. Therefore, all things have their comings and their goings. But the alchemist and the mystic was taught that the transition from this world to the next is not a death, and the perfect acceptance of life overcomes the illusion of the reality of death. In other words, that in which life exists may be transformed, the body of it may be changed, the life may be incorporated into other creatures, but life itself cannot die. The life in the individual cannot die, but it can depart from the body. But this departure is not death. It is transition into another dimension of space.
My name is Robert Sepper.
No one could assist him. No one could do it for him. No one could walk with him. No one could prevent him from making mistakes. It was a lonely journey, a journey from illusion to light, from darkness to participation in eternal truth. This actually did affect the rise of the Christian faith in the early medieval period. The Grail cycle, regardless of its origin, which may have been among the mystery schools of Egypt, Asia, North Africa, Greece, on the level of insight. They were part of a level of internal illumination and not an organization. This seems to meet most of the requirements of the subject, but leads, of course, inevitably to the dedication for the search. A dedication which was part of the vow of knighthood back in the medieval period. The vigil of the Grail was always in a church, and a knight receiving ordination into his order spent the first night in prayer and meditation before the altar of his local church. Having thus dedicated himself internally by a voluntary action of his own, he started out was searching to become one with the communion of saints, with those of the other life who had attained the illumination of the soul. It was therefore the soul in man searching for the eternal soul in life, and this search had to be a personal dedication. Those who achieved the search and finally beheld the grail became a company apart, but they were never organized as an organization. They became mutually knowing of each other.
This was a place that Graham and I visited here, which really spectacularly embodies this whole phenomenon. This is known as Dry Falls Cataract, and it's about 5 miles wide. And I'm going to show you ground photographs and a couple of aerial photographs of it, so you can kind of get the scale of the thing. Now,
the great thing is anybody can go there. Yeah. This is on the land. It's ours to look at. We can all go and see this. It's an amazing trip to see it.
You could go there, Joe. They would let you in there to see this.
Where were you trespassing?
On that particular shot, that huge 18,000-ton boulder is surrounded by notices which say no trespassing.
They weren't there when I was there.
Don't step on it. So I trespassed. I mean, the thing is made of basalt, and my footstep is not going to do it any harm.
Yeah, I bet you nobody even noticed that Graham had been up there.
So it's not like a private property issue. It's like they're just trying to keep people.
I think it is actually a private property.
Probably is.
Yeah.
Because I have noticed from the first time I went there, which was, gosh, I don't know, 90